Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. Today I am making a batch of 8 Easter cards, and there's a story behind this which I shared over on the Scrap Happy blog, so if you are interested in more details, go ahead and head over there. All the links will be in the description. So I will give you lots of tips and tricks as we go, and this first one is use what you already have. So I already had a stack of cards made that I'm going to use to add into my batch because I'm sending this batch off to a senior meal service for Easter time. Another tip is to pull out all of your themed things at once, because if you have to get up multiple times to go back and get that other thing that you're thinking about, it takes a lot longer. So all of these tips are hopefully going to help save you some time if you're making a big batch of cards. Now today I'm only making 8, but my goal is to make 36 of these cards to send along. So you can see I was sorting through my supplies, trying to start getting some inspiration, but then I decided, don't reinvent the wheel. I went and grabbed my SCT magazine, and they've got card sketches in there, and so I am just going to use that inspiration. The card sketch in the magazine happens to match one of the cards I already made pretty closely, so I'm going to use both of those pieces for my inspiration. I know there's a lot of die cutting in this card, so one of the tips is to swap out any extra die pieces like those banners with punches instead. I also cut apart my stamp so that when I get to the stamping and embossing step, I don't have to worry about where I'm inking. I can just ink up the whole thing because I know it's only the part I need. Don't worry, you can just tuck those stamps right back together if you want the whole phrase in the future. Now the inspiration piece has a pattern in the background, which could be a stamped pattern, but I'm just going to use pattern paper. So another tip is to use pre-made items. And in fact, if you had pre-made flowers, like a flower die cut pack, you could do that instead of all the die cutting and save yourself a lot of time. I don't have those, so I will go ahead and do the die cutting in a little bit. But I'm going to be sure to do all like tasks together, and that is totally assembly line mentality. So first I'm cutting down all of my card fronts. Then I'm cutting down all of my card panels. Once I've got those panels cut down, I'm using the scraps to punch out my tags that are going to hold my sentiment. And then I turn to cutting and scoring all my card bases. And that completes all the work that I need to do with the trimmer, so I can go ahead and set that aside. Now I did have to shift gears here a little bit to save some extra time. The flowers from my inspiration card were ink blended, and I didn't want to have to take the time to do that, so I'm just going to use solid colored cardstock, knowing that I will add ink to the edges anyway, even if I had ink blended it. So I'm going to skip the ink blending step, use solid cardstock, and then go ahead and move on to the inked edges. And then I'm not overthinking it. I just grabbed a stash of pastel colors from pinks and greens to be flowers and leaves, and I'm going to use whatever colors I have the right sizes for. Now, when you are die cutting a lot of pieces, and this turns out to be a lot of pieces for this card, I like to tape my dies together, the similar dies together, so that I have a little handle to pick them up and lift them and move them on to the next piece of cardstock. That saves time. I also load up my die platform with as many dies as I can run through at a time. When I'm doing intricate dies, like this sentiment die, it's going to have a little bits and pieces left over in between the letters. I believe those are called chads. So I'm not going to clean up any of that. I'm just going to throw it in a pile, and we'll get to cleaning those up later. I do check my die and pop out any things that are stuck in the die just in case, but because I set up my die with 2 pieces of cardstock shims under the cutting mat, that gave me plenty of pressure that everything popped out nice and cleanly, and I didn't have to worry about taking the time to clean up the die. Now here's where I start inking the flowers, and now I'm going to prioritize. What things do I really want to be inked first? If I run out of energy, I want to make sure those get done. And then if I still have energy, I can go back and do the rest later. So I start with the front petal of the flowers, the leaves, and I know I want the tags to be inked, so that's where I begin. I do go back later, ink the big portion of the flowers and the card panels so that I have more texture and dimension on these cards. But prioritize, start with that, and see if you have energy for the rest. Don't forget to corral your card parts as you're going so you don't lose anything and have to spend time remaking things. I just use these little paper trays that I put together, and it holds everything in place so I can't lose anything. And then comes the cleaning up those intricate die parts. Now I did start doing this with my tweezers, but then I thought, what if I grabbed my cleaning up tool that is used for cleaning the actual dies themselves, and if I put a little foam cushion underneath there, if that would work. And I'm happy to say that it mostly did work. I was worried it would mangle the die cuts, but it did just fine. Now it wasn't 100%, but for those, that 5%, I could just use my tweezers. So a stamping time saver is that I get my stamping platform set up so I can just do lots of repeat batch stamping, and then I actually rotate it. Even though the stamp is upside down, it is closer to me, and that makes my reach movements less far, which actually saves time. And when you're doing a lot, it does add up. Now I'm heat embossing these and stamping with Versamark ink, but you can let it sit for just a minute before you put your embossing powder. So I will do one small batch of stamping powder, and then another small batch of stamping and powder, and that way I'm saving time with having to powder in between every single item. And this is where I decided to go back and finish up the extra inking steps that I wasn't sure I was going to get to. And I want to be sure to add embellishments to these cards, so I just grabbed some simple twine in white, which matches the embossing, and I cut all of the lengths at once and then tie all the bows. Again, I'm assembly lining everything. Now, I do need to stop occasionally to double check my design as I go to make sure things are going to fit where I think they look good. And then I decide the tags are going to go in a horizontal orientation, and so I'm ready to start gluing my sentiments down, and I'm going to do what I call puddle gluing, where I put a puddle of glue on a sheet of disposable paper, just tap my delicate sentiments in that glue and then tap off once or twice, and that adds enough glue that I do not have to worry about using a fine tip to get on the back of each of those tiny letters. I also love to use foam tape when I'm doing big batches of cards, because if you use foam squares or foam circles, believe it or not, removing all of those individual little backers to the foam adds up time-wise. So if you use foam tape, you just have one or two backers to zip off and you're ready to move on. I did decide that this design needed a little bit of something extra, so I grabbed that tag punch again, and then with a circle punch, I clipped off the tag, and that creates that arched edge, which reminds me of a flower pot. So I'm going to go ahead and create these quick little simple flower pots for my flowers to go in. And I think that white of the flower pot helps balance off the white in the Easter greeting and the white in the twine, and helps create a little more balance with the cards that way and a little more visual interest. And then after that, it's really just a matter of gluing everything together. So I line up all my flowers, put all the glue down at once, glue all the petals on, reline them up, put all the glue on at once, glue all the stems on, and keep going with that assembly line. I do finish up my first trial card to make sure that the entire design is working, and then I'm ready to assembly line the rest of the cards. So there you go. That is a batch of 8 Easter cards for you, and I will be making more cards, probably a different design so I don't get bored with things. And eventually I'll have 36 cards to send off to those seniors. Thanks for watching today. I hope this brought you some Easter card inspiration, as well as tips and tricks on making large batches of cards. And tomorrow is April 1st, and that means kit building time, so I hope you'll join me then for my scrapbook kit build.